Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Ann Christensen, a licensed prayer practitioner at Light on the Mountains. I've got a little stuff in here today, so.
Don't we all?
Thank you.
Testify.
Okay, sorry. So now it's time to take a deep breath. Go within. I know that there is one universal spirit, one infinite intelligence, one divine presence, one creative force. That presence, that spirit is all there is, but it is everything and in everyone and in everything in the universe. And I am so grateful for that because it is love and joy and beauty. It is peace and harmony, order and balance, goodness, wisdom, intelligence, infinite abundance, and perfect health. And I am so grateful that that is what we have within us, each one of us. I am also grateful for this wonderful community and the philosophy of Ernest Holmes that gives us all of this good information and helps us move through every day. And I'm thankful for everybody that makes this community what it is. It's wonderful. I give thanks for all the volunteers. I give thanks for Sheila, who is doing our coffee today. I give thanks for my fellow practitioners, for the Leadership Council, and everybody else, the greeters, everyone who does what we need to make this place work. And I especially give thanks for Reverend John and his always perfect message, and RL and Max in their beautiful music. And I give thanks for this beautiful rainy day and for everyone who is out online too, watching and listening. And together we say, and so it is. Is that me? No. The reading today is from April's Science of Mind magazine. And I'm going to read most of a little article called Take Your Place in the Creative Process by Carol Carnes. And this paragraph starts with the idea-to-form process. So the idea turning into form process. We are involved in the creative process every moment of our lives. Removing ourselves from the ever-becoming universe is impossible. The idea-to-form process is built into every human being. We cannot stop it or opt out of it. Every object in our sight, the flower arrangement on the dining table, the plants in our garden, the new car in the driveway, is the result of the creative process. This physical world is the evidence of the ongoing activity of capital I intelligence producing form. Meister Eckhart said, God is forever begetting the only begotten. Every creation is a new version of the original idea. Elevate the idea, and the manifestation is also made new, expanded, more inclusive. Oops. Little trouble here. The creative intelligence does not repair or fix. It makes new things from new ideas. The great discovery of the ages is that our personal mind participates in the grand creative process. How this dynamic is spoken about depends largely on our version of reality. Some say we are co-creators with God. We have a silent partner, or we are using a universal law. Yet, in any attempt to explain how things happen, we must place ourselves at the center of the action. When we first contemplate this simple truth, it may be both frightening and liberating. We are suddenly empowered and at the same time lose all blaming rights. We can no longer attribute the cause of our experience to anyone or anything but us. Yes, things happen that seem out of our control, but how we experience them is a personal thing. And the next paragraph is trust the process. Those born with artistic gifts trust the process innately. As my friend said, they do not question the idea. They allow it to use their hands and feet. The rest of us can learn to dive into the flow of ideas, seeking outlet with a little practice and perhaps a new take on reality. In The Creative Encounter, Howard Thurman wrote, "There is a world within where for us the great issues of our lives are determined." He went on to emphasize how private it is. We have a secret inner life where we communicate with the field of all potential via the quality of our thoughts. Our power resides in how we use it. What the world needs now is a new understanding of how things happen, not why. There are no good answers to the why questions. How anything moves from invisible idea to visible form is the grand frontier of both religion and science. This is where they merge. Einstein established there is an invisible connection to all things and to all possibility. Our unity with a higher potential contains more than we can ever fully reveal, but in the attempt we can visibly transform our personal lives and by extension the world. Revelation 21:5 refers to the one sitting on the throne saying, "Behold, I make all things new." The same power exists in us. It is the urge to create greater good, to experience more loving relationships, to feel a deeper connection with nature, to establish peace and well-being for ourselves and our world. These deep longings are nothing more than ideas wanting to be made into something. Train your mind to turn naturally to what is possible. Expect good ideas to arise in your awareness. Accept those that seem rightfully yours. Trust the creative process. Take your rightful place as the designer of your personal experience. Practice generating your highest and best thoughts. And now it is time for the affirmation, which is on this enclosure, the affirmation for May in red. Let's read it together. I am a healing presence that recognizes love, wholeness, and perfection in all people and circumstances. That's it. And now.
Thank you.
Hi, John. Morning. Thank you, RL. Thank you, Max. Good morning, everyone, on this nice rainy day. So, what should we talk about?
Is there anything going on?
No. Let's talk about changing the world. You up for that? Let's talk about changing the world. And I want you to believe and know that you can. And the way that we are going to begin talking about changing the world, in fact, this whole month of thinking what would be a good theme. I know we're still May, but I'm kind of in June already. You know, I've kind of put May to rest. Talk about something that I'm calling intentional manifestation, meaning I'm not talking about getting new furniture. I'm talking about, through your intention, consciously changing the world. And I know it seems like a big order, doesn't it? But in group consciousness, we create anything. In group consciousness, we have created the world in which we are experiencing. And in a revised group consciousness, we can change the world again. And the way that we begin to do that is in prayer. And so this month especially, I want to talk to prayer, but to get like down and dirty with it. Prayer is not a spectator sport. It is something that draws you out of yourself as a renewed person to show up differently in the world. We have all been, I think, taught as we grow up in most of the religious practices that we have been grown into, that it is a spectator sport, that it is something that is passive, that is something that you do in your little room or chair, and it starts in that, but it is just step one. So if nothing else this month, I want to break us out of this idea that we stay in a sense, step one of I stay in my prayer position and stay here. That it's so much more than that. Often in times like these, when catastrophes in the world that happen, we have been, of course, brought to this idea how ineffectual of offering thoughts and prayers are to people. Well, in New Thought, we offer thoughts, prayers, and action. And here is the clincher here, the action comes from you. So when we entertain the idea of prayer, it is not just to have an inner transformation, which is, again, step one. It is something far more. Just a little quote from Mother Teresa. She says, I used to pray that God would feed the hungry, or do this or that, but now I pray that he will guide me to do whatever I am supposed to do, what I can do. I used to pray for answers, but now I pray for strength. I used to believe that prayers change things, but now I know that prayer changes us and we change things. So going to prayer is step one, and then realizing that every thought, every action you have is the next step of that prayer. So when you pray sincerely, have you ever really thought what happens energetically? Or did you think, like often, as I was raised, that you kind of delegate it to a certain angel or somebody, or if it was really serious, you go to Mary, it's like, yeah, she's the big gun, you go to her, and you put it on her desk, so I just know she'll put it to the top and get right to it. That's not energetically what happens. So when you are in prayer, and however that is for you, I know we have a certain way that we teach prayer here, but it's not so much in the words, but into the energy and belief and thought behind it that is important. In fact, you could be the least eloquent person in the world, but if you're there in consciousness, it's going to happen. And this is how it happens. So when you make a sincere or set a sincere intention to move forward in some place, to say, use me, change me so I can change the world, you energetically set a path before you that was not there or could not be seen before. You have suddenly shifted to another possibility, another fork in the road that would make a way forward possible for you that was not possible for you. And part of to see prayer, how it unfolds in your life, is to begin to look for those little clues and signs along the way, whether it starts with another thought, whether it's an overheard conversation, where you see something on the TV that says, oh, show up here to make your voice known, that things that you would not see before, you are now seeing. And that's still not quite yet enough. Seen is one thing, follow through is another. So the way that prayers works is that it changes you. It helps you see a path that was not there before, or if it was there before, you weren't aware of it. And then the next step of that is for you to take that conscious step to say, I'm showing up. It could be anywhere, big, large, indifferent steps that you take. But to understand that every time that you take a step in the physical world that is propelled by that prayer, that energetic path that you set, that you create more momentum. And every time, every day that you take it a little bit step further, more momentum yet. As you in that prayer start to just naturally get drawn to people with the same prayer and intention, that energy grows further. So that's how amazing prayer is when you stop seeing it as, again, as a spectator sport and as something for someone else to do and follow up for. Yes, pray for your elected officials, but know that you can't pray for them and then go on vacation. It's like, oh, we voted them in, let them do it. Well, to a certain extent, they do have a job, but sometimes you have to be the person to light the fire underneath them. All of us. So again, there is no vacation right now. So in this time of history where amazing things are possible, in a sense in consciousness, there's no vacation. You don't get a day off anymore in this. Not to say that you're going to work yourself to death, but this idea of opening yourself up in intention and prayer to know that you can help change the world by your intentions and by your follow-through. And I know, actually, this is very intimidating on some level. This is how I know that my prayer is starting to be answered. In other words, I'm starting to see the signs along the way. I know that it's happening because my human reaction is, oh, I didn't have that in mind. Oh, that sounds like a little bit too much for me. Or that would mean I would have to call this person that I'm intimidated about and call in possibly their assistance or to help in some way. Or, actually what I had in mind was to stay home today. But answered prayer says, no, actually this is not the day to stay home. This is when you call that person. This is when you go to that place. And so again, if it seems like, okay, like I almost want to cancel the prayer because all this stuff is happening, your prayer is being answered. And in those moments, if you fall into that just human overwhelm, oh no, I think I'll step back, you're cutting off the energy of your prayer. Why didn't it happen from here? You cut it off. One of the things I pray for most right now, for me personally, is just courage to follow through. The courage to listen and not freak out when I hear the answer because it's not a convenient answer for me. Again, convenience is out the window right now. I just want you to know. Changing the world, there's not like, gee, could I still play cards on Wednesday with my friends? Probably no. Actually, you can't. As it comes, you have to react and move forward. That are the rules of how prayer works. So yes, it is not a delegation. It is actually saying, so your prayer is actually this to the universe. I give you permission to mess with my life. I give you permission to make things inconvenient. I give you permission to, I'm more available on Wednesday, but you're going to ask me to do something on Tuesday, or you know what I mean. It's just, it's inconvenient. But I think right now is the time, especially now, I think we are all aware that it's time to, in prayer, step up and step out of where we are comfortable to change the world. So there's a couple other aspects of prayer I want to kind of preview today. We're probably going to pick them up throughout June a bit. So sometimes what you see before us is what Ernest Holmes would call the condition or the circumstance is so convincing that it seems like there is absolutely nothing that we could do in prayer or otherwise to make it better. And I could think of a couple things today. It is very convincing as we look at gun violence in our country that there is the story that we see is that there are no solutions, that it is an escalating issue, that there is no way to resolve it, and there are some quote-unquote solutions being put forward that we know is pretty much like throwing gasoline on a fire. It just would make it worse. But those conditions, circumstances, the picture we see as spoken by different people are very convincing, aren't they? It's very easy to go into despair because we think it is so entrenched in who we are that the picture of it tells us that there is no route of healing possible. So Ernest Holmes says, in a sense, and this is often misunderstood, he says we must, in our prayer, in our intentional manifestation, to turn away from conditions or the circumstance. This does not mean that you turn a blind eye, or what does it kids do? Go, bah, 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 I don't see it, I don't hear it, something like that. That's not what that means. In fact, I've had people incorrectly translate that and say, well, I just need to just put on a happy face and know all this is going to be well. That doesn't work either. So if this is what turning away from conditions actually mean, it means that you are very aware of what is in front of you, but you no longer allow it to have power over you. That you, in a sense, something I've been talking about in our class on Tuesday nights, you energetically cut that cord of influence. It is there, it needs to be dealt with, but you say, not today. We have a different route to go. And there was an amazing, amazing example of this week that you may or may not have picked up in this tragic story that we have seen unfold in the news. And I mean, so many layers of just trauma this week that even if you were glued to your TV sets, I don't know if you could have gotten every single layer of it. And so I recommend that we all need to be aware and watch as much as we need to, and then take a step back. Don't hide from it, but don't glue yourself to it, if you can find that kind of in between. So part of this tragedy, as most of us probably know at this point, is that the shooter was still active for about an hour while police were on the scene. There were 19 police people who chose to not go after the shooter. And God, what a tragedy. What a tragedy. And there were kids in that room or in the next room, as I hear, calling 911. It says, he's here, please come in, and they weren't coming in. And parents were just getting, obviously, can you imagine, if you are parents, if you had a young kid and there's 19 policemen in front of you and they're not going in, how you would be as a parent? These parents are pleading with the police to go in. And in fact, there was a couple that were just getting so in their face that got arrested and handcuffed. These parents whose kids are in the school who are traumatized. But here is the turn away from the condition part. So one of these women moms who was handcuffed and officially arrested, somehow got them to unhandcuff her. I don't know, she promised to do what they say. And she slipped away. She climbed a fence, found her kids, and got them out of there. So the condition was there are 19 well-armed police people armed with guns, tasers, handcuffs, and in a sense, they were very real. In fact, she had been handcuffed, and she chose, in a sense, to turn away from the condition and do what she felt was truly right and called for in that moment. So again, it's not ignoring the facts in front of you. It's saying, not today, you don't. So that is the challenge of turning away from conditions. Again, 19 police people with guns is very convincing circumstance and condition. And I'm not saying that would be the right thing to do in all circumstances. But in a sense, I imagine that mom actually living in a state of prayer in that moment where whether she realized it or not, and just got the hit of that's what she needed to do. So as we look at our world that again seems to have lost its mind, the conditions of it are very, very convincing. And through our activity of regular practice of prayer and meditation, to get into tune with what is our alternative in spite of this craziness that we see in front of us. And to know that there is a growing energy that you can be part of it, that right now, especially right now, is saying, no, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. So through your prayer, you can, in a sense, sign up for that membership, but know that there are several steps along the way. And only you will know what those steps are as you join with other people. Again, things like contacting your elected officials, things like that, knowing that there are some common sense things that have been put forward that 90% of the people in our country think is right, but yet they're not into law. So part of this is to just first in the obvious step forward, the things that should be easy, but the appearances are making it not easy. And then as your prayer continues to be answered and you are shown what it is for you to do as you join with other people, it goes further and further. And there is a point where you see that circumstance that seems so scary and so unmovable that you see it melt away. It was, as they say, just the silly man behind the curtain who had nothing to do about anything. That's where I believe we can go in changing the world if we energetically and prayerfully say, sign me up. That's what it is. Part of it is to go from despair to knowing that there is a possibility. And to know that, again, all your thought processes and what we talk about it is an affirmative process and is, in effect, prayer. So we should notice, what are we talking about? And how are we talking about it? So certainly in these last 3 or 4 years, I'm always meeting with people all the time, and not necessarily official meetings. A lot of times, like I said, it happens at Atkinson's or it happens at the post office, and people pull me aside for 2 or 3 minutes. And I know, especially in these last 3 or 4 years, there has been an elevated sense of despair. And people are like, what do we do? And a couple people, and one in particular I'm thinking that I had a conversation with a few months ago, so in despair, and again, I'm not talking against them, we are so immersed in it that it's difficult not to take it in. And laid out how they thought the next couple years would go, and it was one disaster after another. They were so in despair that they couldn't see past the conditions. They couldn't see any way to buy into the conditions anymore. And we can all do that from time to time. So part of it is to seek support from others through our own prayer practice to, first and foremost, move out of that conditioned state to know that another way is possible. And I know that sometimes it is so difficult. As we watched the news this week, the conditions were so convincing. But the only way it's going to change if we say that I'm going to shift anyway, even in my grief, even in my despair, even in my feeling that nothing good can come out of this, I'm still going to step forward and at least have that little bit of part of me to begin with to know that it can. So here's the second step. And none of these steps are easy. I just want you to know. You're like, oh, step one's hard. Can we get to the easy step? No easy steps. So let's go to the next difficult step here. So as we are in this situation and so many difficult things going on in the world, our human bent is to take whatever is happening and the people involved and to, in a sense, put a circle around them and put over here as the other. And in many ways they are, when you think of doing certain things in the world, like actually shooting 19 kids. How could that not be, in a quote, the other? Part of changing the world is reintegrating that outcast situation into where we are. And I know it's rough. So this week in my blog, I put a little link to a 30-minute little lesson and meditation on visioning by Michael Beckwith. And I hope some of you watched it. It is really a great thing. Again, it's about how to take prayer from something being passive to something dynamic of how you truly change your life. And as he's discussing this, and before leading us through what he called the visioning process, he said, first we have to set the tone. We have to set the tone in unconditional love. I know already you're thinking, oh, wait, John, we can't go there. Yes, we're going to go there. Unconditional love, often we think of as a human feeling and emotion that we express, but it is also a spiritual principle in which resides what we call the consciousness of the Christ, which is knowing in the center of all things, though deeply buried, there is a perfection that is connected to all that there is. And part of healing our world is to integrate or reintegrate those parts that we, in a sense, have collectively made separate. And again, this is rough. It's not easy. A book that in our book discussion this week, I Am the Word, there was an exercise offered with this of how do you, in a sense, have love expressed through you. Again, not romantic love. I'm talking about the spiritual principle of love and the Christ consciousness that in a meditative state to imagine someone you do truly love being within your circle and how easy that is to see love expressed through that person. The second part of that is to take someone that you wouldn't want to be in the same country with, let alone in the same room, into that circle. It's a rough idea. That which you fear most, that which you even hate most, that which you want to just see disintegrated and blown off the face of the earth, to integrate energetically and to recognize that as messed up as this situation is, there is the power and presence of the Christ consciousness buried in there somewhere. Basically what this is doing is not, and as humans we think, well, that's giving approval of this thing. No. It's shooting up a flare saying, I know you're still in there. It's buried, it's deep, it hasn't been seen for years, but I know it's in there. So as we look at this terrible situation that has unfolded, and there are so many people that we could nominate as villains this week, quite frankly, and to bring them into that circle of the Christ consciousness, not as a way of condoning it, not even as a way of getting into the level of forgiveness yet, but just acknowledging that in this messed up, upside down situation that seems almost unsolvable right now, that there is the power and the presence of the Christ consciousness in there, and my job is to help find it and recognize it. So if you are in the lowest part of your life, imagine some bad or difficult part of your life and times it by 10. Imagine what someone seeing that spark of the Christ in you might do at that moment. Have you had anyone come up to you when you were at your lowest moment and just say, I know you can. I know there's something in there that you can still draw upon. I've had that, and it changed my life. Literally changed my life. When I mean, at a level of despair, and just that little spark of someone saying, you know, there's something still there to live for. There's still something good. There's still something to draw from there. So this does not mean that you literally knock on someone's door or that helped with, with this issue this week, I mean, in a negative way, and take them in physically. You're doing this in consciousness. This is part of your prayer work. That anything in the world right now that is so distressful that we are bringing into this circle and saying, I know you are still in there. And I know it just rubs the wrong way, doesn't it? Like, how can we do that? It's the only way that this is going to get any better. Again, you don't say that was okay, don't worry about it. There is accountability just in the balance of the universe that will show its way. But to recognize in this prayer that we put forward, in this conscious intention, to say, the Christ consciousness is here still, and I'm going to take a stand to recognize it and know that it can flourish again. As any steps you feel called to take in the next few weeks, whether it's politically or otherwise, whether you're doing a mass protest with someone, that it is so easy in those moments to go over into not only to despair, but into great anger. And not to say that there can't be a positive aspect in anger, but here's what I want you to do in those moments, to say, in this crazy moment where you might even be confronting someone who is, in your mind, quote unquote, the problem, to just say, the presence of the Christ is right here as I stand and I speak. Boy, that's hard, isn't it? When you're just nose to nose with, quote unquote, the problem, The presence of the Christ is right here where I speak. And I'm not saying Christ as in a Christian view of Jesus. I'm saying the Christ consciousness, which is a universal presence and principle. That to recognize in this big old mess, it's right here. And even try that in your personal issues during day to day. If you're having a difficult moment with anyone, to say in your mind, the presence of the Christ consciousness is right here. You will be amazed at how it changes you, and how it changes you. It changes the energy of the situation you are in, and how it is an invitation to whoever whom you are in conversation with or activity with, an invitation for them to do something different. And this is amazing. When you start to do it, it's almost like a game. Like you have someone, you're reacting like this and you remember yourself. The Christ consciousness is right here. And when you get really founded into that energy, I have seen times where the person gets so confused they don't know what happened. Just like, feels like someone pulled the plug here. Something changed. And it's like, it's not going in that negative way that they thought it was going to go. So that's how another way that you take prayer into action. And one last thing we're going to preview just a little bit. It's gotten longer than I thought. The official talk title today was to, what was my talk title? If I can't remember it, maybe I'm not supposed to talk about it. I don't know. Means I'm not supposed to talk about it. Oh, growing edge.
Yes.
So this is just a little teaser. Stay tuned, because we have a lot going on this month in a lot of ways. Growing edge means this. We think answered prayer is, great, this will be fun. Growing edge means, here is your biggest trial or challenge that you now have to face within yourself. It's like, oh, glad that you signed up, but you've got to do some healing on your own. Your growing edge is like, oh, that's not what I had in mind. Prayer is actually not all that much fun when you get down to it. It's like, I really liked being kind of like, covers over my head, get a little latte occasionally, and just kind of hide from it all. But this says, you've told the universe, bring it on, basically. And bring it on meaning healing within yourself. So the growing edge in this visioning process is saying that, okay, bring me to the spot that needs to be healed most. And it's the spot that I honestly, as a human being, want to go the least. So I'm just going to leave you with one thing I wrote in my blog today from Howard Thurman. He was a 20th century theologian, a giant in the civil rights movement of the 60s. He is such a positive force when you do his readings. I always go to Howard Thurman, and you think, well, gosh, how can you be so positive? And I think, his ancestors, his grandmother, in fact, was an enslaved person. So I think if he can find that spot of possibility with all that, his history, I think I can figure it out, or at least aspire to it. He says, such is our growing edge. It is in the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed. The upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and men have lost their reason, the source of confidence when worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash. The birth of a child, life's most dramatic answer to death. This is the growing edge incarnate. Look well to the growing edge. So let's take this in. Let's take a deep breath in and deep breath out. There's so much to process this week. But I know as we recognize the presence of the Christ consciousness here, we are no longer convinced by appearances. There is so much more available. And those appearances are so convincing. They spend a lot of time and energy to convince us. And now we say enough. We set a course of intentional movement forward, intentional manifestation of a world that is healed. And we know that it is not too big of a request to ask for, because we collectively are making it. And in this request, we in consciousness are not making anyone else wrong. In fact, those that in our minds are causing so much trouble and discord, that presence of the Christ is right there within them as well. And we at this moment connect with that and say, we know you are there. I support your presence and it growing and flourishing again, even though it has been forgotten for so long. We know it is there. And we take that one phrase into every activity that we go into from this day forward. In every situation, person in which we come in contact with, we say, I know you are there. You are fully present. You are fully connected with me and all else. And we go forward from that baseline of understanding. The Christ consciousness is there. And so we simply give thanks for that tool, for that understanding. And if in moments that we fall into despair, we come back to this moment where we're here together and so sure of it being here and reinvigorate ourselves in gratitude, knowing that is there. And in that gratitude, we simply release it and let it go. We've set the intention, we've spoken a phrase of truth, and we let the world, or let the universe, create it in its most perfect form. It is done. And so it is.